In this video we're going to go over some basic tips and safety instruction for using sharps, hot glue guns and adhesives. Now in your model making sessions you'll be using low density materials such as paper, card and foam board. The basic tools for cutting, I'm sure you're familiar with, are scissors, box cutters, snappy blade, craft knives, the scalpel bladed craft knife and scalpels themselves. We'll start with the scissors, very familiar object and tool I'm sure you've used plenty of times before. With all cutting tools, the first thing you should do is inspect that they're in good condition, that the blade is notch free, without any glues or rust on the actual cutting surfaces, and the handle is in good condition, so you're not going to hurt your hands. When not using it, the blades need to be together and placed in a position where they can't easily be knocked off the bench or hurt anyone else working next to you. Very simply, these are right-handed scissors. We shall be getting some left-handed as well, for those of you who prefer to use your left hand when cutting, but that's your basic tool for paperwork and very thin card. After that, the tools you'll be given for cutting and using during your model making sessions will be the snappy type craft knives and the scalpel bladed craft knife. Now the scalpel bladed craft knife comes with its own safety cap. Okay, so it's just a pull off push fit type cap. Must be always in place when it's not in use. To use it, you remove the cap, and you'll find with all model making type knives that the cutting edge, it's only on one side, and very often, especially with the scalpel type blades, it will go to a needle point at the ends. To hold this particular tool, you have a cylindrical handle with a hatched grip plate. You hold it firmly like so in your favoured hand, and then if the blade is in good condition and it appears to be sharp, you can go ahead and start using it. If you see anything wrong with the handle or blade, immediately just discard that one and we can supply you with something in a better condition or replace the blade itself. Replacing the blade on this particular tool is quite easy. You have this hatched collar, you loosen it like so, make sure you grip the blade on the blunt side, not on the sharp side, and it just comes free. Again, if it becomes loose, you can tighten it or replace a new blade into the slotted end like so, and tighten the collar, cap on, and it's ready for use. So that is your basic type craft knife, scalpel bladed craft knife. These are the snappy bladed craft knives. I quite like them, sometimes known as also as box cutters. They have a safety feature as the blade retracts into the handle itself. You push it forward and retract it using this button here, and it has a separate secondary button which will lock it into position. When you use it, you should always use it in a position where your hands are in control of the handle itself. And to replace the blade, we just remove one section. So you'll see by these lines that it's segmented. Now, to take one off, lock the blade so the segment you want to remove is just further than the end of the handle, and you'll find in the ends there will be a little extra tool like so, and this one has a slot here. Now the slot goes over the blade, and then you want to snap it away from you so it drops onto the cutting mat and not pings up or onto the floor. And then you've exposed a new section of blade which should be nice and sharp, and then replace the removal tool back on the end of the actual handle itself. All of these, although they're different sizes, operate in a very similar fashion. You can see segments there, and the removal tool on this particular one is to push it into the end and you snap it off. And then this one should be similarly into the end and you snap it off, again away from you. If you have removed the blade and you need to dispose of it, look for these yellow bins. They're sharp guard bins. You can't open them. They should have a hole in the top or a sliding little door for you to place your disposable blades safely, and these are taken away and incinerated rather than anyone actually having to physically touch those blades again. They should be in every area that you'll be model making in fabrication. So those are those particular tools. Then we have your standard Stanley blade or box cutter. These tend to be used universally for marking denser materials, but also cutting as well. We don't use them for model making generally because we have the other tools, but they are positioned around the fabrication for cutting out if you require them. Again, they have a retractable blade. It's on a ratcheted system, so you can expose it just a little bit or fully, and then it's locked in position. And the handle has a little grip here for your thumb or your finger for you to control the blade while you're cutting. Again, retract the blade when it's not in use. Here are your standard scalpels for very fine work. They should come with a safety cap, but safety caps do go missing occasionally. So you can, at a pinch, use a little bit of foam board, something like that, and push the blade into it to protect it. Make sure if you're using that you don't push it through into your hand on the other side, that it's safely out of the way. Now, to replace these blades, it's a slightly different proposition because they are sprung loaded onto the handle. So we are getting some specialty removers for these blades, but another way of doing it would be to use a pair of pliers. Don't use your hands only. And on the end, you will see that it's connected onto this piece, little slotted piece here. So you lift it, and rather than pulling with all your might, use your thumb to push, once it's over, the blade off like so. And again, to pop it on, it's quite simple. You get it, if you can see, the neck here has a groove on either side which fits into this opening. So you get the opening slipped over the groove, and then it will slide until the end drops over the lug and it locks it in position. Okay, so we'll just do that again. You lift it or flex it just enough so it comes over the end of the lug, and then use your thumb rather than your full force just to push it free. And it's as simple as that. And it should be fairly simple, he says, to pop back on into position like that. Never just try to flex it with your nails and pull it off with your hands. They're super sharp. Even when they've lost their ability to cut through card and paper, they can still cut, especially if you're pushing really hard through anything in the way. Okay, so those are your basic tools and implements for that. Using them, especially on paper, should be quite simple. We must, however, always use a cutting mat. Okay, so these are self-healing cutting mats. Self-healing principle is if you score them, they come back together and it remains a flat surface for working on. Okay, these are double-sided, so you can use them either way, but on this particular side we have a grid marked as well, so you can use the grid for marking out. Okay. If you were going to be using your cutting knives for cutting out some paper shapes, you can use any rule you like to mark out your shape. Let's mark a triangle. But when it comes to the actual cutting, if you want something to use as a guide, we have these rippled safety rulers. Now the idea is that your finger and thumb remains in this little hollow and the cutting blade runs along here. Whereas with a flat ruler, it can very easily jump off and score across the rule or anything else that's in the way. So pop in the safety ruler in position, like so. Remove the cap. You want to use it in the most practical way you find easiest. And when cutting out a shape, I often start slightly over and then cut slightly further, and that way then I don't have to try to cut out those irritating little tails which can tear when you're pulling your paper or card out from the shape, and you just have a little bit of an overcut. Okay. And it should pop out quite easily, like so. If you're cutting a squiggly line or a roundy shape, again, it's easier if you put firm pressure on and try to cut the shape without your hand in the way in one cut. That doesn't mean you can't stop during the cut and reorientate if you slightly go offline, or even turn the paper and bring it into an easier arc for your arms and your hands to go around. But don't lose the pressure with or the contact with your material, otherwise you'll have to relocate the blade. Now this is a trickier part of the cut, but I should, if I keep orientating, be able to bring the knife all the way round. I did run out of cutting mat then. All the way around without my fingers being in the way of the cut. So if I do accidentally pull too hard, I'm not going to be in line with that. I'm going to be behind or to the side. And again, place your cap on for safety when you finish. Pop it out of the way. Now, using the denser materials are a slightly harder proposition. So here we have a little bit of 2.5mm or 3mm grey card, and you will find that firm pressure may not be enough to cut through in one go. It means you'll have to make multiple cuts. Do not be tempted to push hard and harder still until it's so much pressure that the blade snaps, or you end up slipping because the blade is out of control. Okay, multiple cuts, and the good thing, if it has a depth to it and a density, this blade will keep traveling along the initial score line until it passes all the way through. Again, you can cut freehand. Keep your fingers out of the way. Just cutting slightly over the line. Or you can use your cutting rule as a guide. Again, not too much pressure. And eventually it should fall through. So I'm just realigning the ruler, and now I'll use a bit more pressure to cut through. I see where I haven't quite crossed the line. I'll just backtrack. Just there. Well, you can see even with the overcuts, I've still got a few little tails inside. Now, I want to clean them up, so I'm just going to, with the card, bring my knife in like so, rather than plucking at it with the point like so. And again, just making sure my hand is always on the uppermost part or to the side. I can then have optimum control and safety over the tools and the materials. So that is your basic cutting tools and methods of cutting during our sessions to keep yourself safe. We'll carry on now with hot glue guns. As with the knives and sharps, you must always inspect any tool you're about to use, especially if it has some element of power or heat or sharpness to it. Hot glue guns can get damaged, they can get gummy, but they can be cleaned up and they can be maintained, but that's to be done before you actually use them and before you insert the glue stick. Now it comes with a stand to keep the hot end or the hot nozzle off of any work or any potential scalding of your fingers. And then the hot glue stick pops into that little aperture into there, and then it's progressed into the heating element using this trigger, and then it's extruded through once it's heated. Takes a little while for it to get up to full temperature. Oh, there's my glasses. You just plug it in into a socket, and then you switch it over when you want to use it. It takes about 4 to 5 minutes for it to heat up to its full working temperature, and then if you are not going to use it for longer than about 10 minutes, you should switch it off completely and then go through a restart heat up 4 or 5 minutes. Otherwise it just keeps extruding the material and heating up for no reason. So rather than you watch this get hot, I'm going to do a jump edit. Okay, so the hot glue gun is ready now to extrude its adhesive. The nozzle is very hot, and underneath I've just placed a little scrap of something to collect any excess glue that drips from the nozzle end. You can also use it for just cleaning up any bits before you actually start your work. Now, principles are very simple. If you have materials, you can either glue the bottom edge of the material and stick your other piece to it, or glue the piece and stick it to the other piece of material. You will have to hold it for a few seconds while the glue hardens from its liquid form, and you do have a few moments, very short moments, just to spread it out if you need to, but it does go hard very quickly. The end piece here of the glue will disappear into the apparatus every time you pump the trigger handle until it gets to a point where it can't be pushed forward anymore. Don't be tempted to use anything else to push it through, like a pencil or a pen. These are non-return, and quite often whatever you push in there, it won't come back out again, and we have had a student extrude black pen through the end of it, where it's melted the actual thing they've used as a plunger. So only use glue sticks, another one on top of that to keep extruding it through. So I can just tidy up the end when I'm ready, and then pump the glue out onto the materials and place it onto the area I want it to be glued against. Now it's good, it will gap fill, and so you can put things on an angle and then perhaps afterwards go behind and put a little extra weld along the seam just to hold it in place. Now you will get little, I don't think the camera picks it up very well, but you will get little spider webs coming away. Don't be tempted or worried about them too much. Just push the stand down. It's better to leave them and then cut them free afterwards when they've gone hard with a pair of scissors, or just pare them off with a little craft knife and sweep them away, rather than while they're hot and sticky trying to pluck them away, because you'll just end up moving all this. Again, there is a little bit of a capacity to spread it out over a short period of time, just to tidy it up. Left it a bit long there, but you can clean it and also trim it just before it goes completely hard. So, and then to clean the end of your blade, use something other than your finger. So, it's not a bad little bond. So, with foam board has a very low density foam in the center of it, and paper skinned applied on the outside faces. It does mean that it has a very low melting temperature for this, so if you actually push your nozzle against foam board, it will start to melt the material rather just apply glue. So you're going to have to hover slightly above and push it on, or mark a line the length you want to connect. So let's say I'm going to put a 2-inch piece of foam board there. Get a fresh piece. So, and then I'll triangulate it. So, take my cutting tool and choose one of these. Lock it in position. And then I'm going to rest my ruler on the wider part of the material, even though this is the piece I want, because it's more stable. Draw the cutting tool across until it parts. And then, if I've got my measurements fairly accurate, I can put a seam of glue along my line and press the other material into it. And again, if I want it angled, I can just start pulling it over before the glue completely dries. So, it's one of those tails there. Leave it for a sec. And there the glue is starting to harden up. and then I can just put an additional seam along here as support to hold it in position. And then I'll wait for those tails to dry off a little bit, and then remove them. A little blade before they dry completely. Of course, another method is to use masking tape to control your glue lines. So you can find the end of this tape. It's a new one. You have to be fairly quick while you're doing it. There for a sec. So I use the width of that board to mark where I want the glue to be. You can use pencil lines if you choose. Extrude a little bit of glue. Pop your piece of material there, and then pull the card away, or so I say the tape away, before the glue goes hard. You have a much cleaner edge finish, like so. Also very useful if we're using other materials as well, it will glue it together. So here we have a little bit of hardwood. You can just pop it together, a little bit of glue. Doing it like so. Take away the excess before it goes completely hard. And then you can bond it to another material like your cardboard to create architectural features. Okay, so as soon as you finish using the hot glue gun and you're not preparing to use it in the next 10 minutes or so, just switch it off at the handle. If they don't have a rocker switch on the actual apparatus, just unplug it from the socket, and then make sure that the cable doesn't touch the hot nozzle end, and it can't be easily knocked from the bench by anyone working next to you. We're quickly going to cover the 3 adhesives other than hot glue that you'll use during your workshops. We have Pritt Stick, which is the least hazardous of the 3. Basically it's a congealed PVA in a stick, and you rotate it like so. Very simple to apply. Often it's easier to apply it to the piece you're sticking to the other piece, because it is quite a wide end to it and you will get glue everywhere, like so, and it will stick quite readily, quite quickly. It's a very good glue for model making. But also, because it's low tack, you can break it if you've made a mistake, or get a cutting tool and just part it on either side until you can wiggle it free. Other than that, we have your standard super glue. Very often it will come with a nozzle applicator, and screwing on the applicator is how you open the sealed tube. Screw it into position, and then it should have broken through, ready for you to squeeze it along the nozzle. Super glue is very super, and it's very gluey, and it will stick things very quickly. That includes your hair, your clothes, your fingers, any other items on the bench that you hasn't really want to be glued to your model, so just be very cautious with it. It's better to leave it for a few moments rather than trying to keep applying and working it all the time. Again, you can use an applicator of some description to stick it to something rather than just having it on, so you can spread it out, or you can press it onto the material, but it's very quickly drying. So the usual method is to apply it again along your material and then stick that to whatever you want it to stick to. It's very good for sticking other materials that are non-fibrous as well together, creating a bond. And then we have our spray adhesive multi-purpose. This one's quite a heavy duty one, but we do have low tack versions known as spray mount, so they have less adhesive quality to them, but they all come in an aerosol, which is obviously hazardous to your respiratory, and also you can see from the symbol there it has a fire retardant symbol on there, so we have to use it with caution. So we will only use these in the spray booth where we have ventilation, but they will be available for sticking larger sheets down as you're using them. But principally these two and your hot glue gun will be the methods by which you'll fix things with adhesive, and then we also have your tapes and things like that, but we'll go through that during the workshop instructions. Okay, thank you for listening.